We learn through our struggles. There's two ways to learn, which is struggle and then sit in it. I call it doing an autopsy, opening it up, see what happened. I'm not looking to place blame. I'm just, let's see what happened. And the other thing that you can do is to invite other people into that autopsy and get their feedback. Because it's one thing to kind of self-diagnose and analyze what's going on, but that's where being vulnerable and finding a group or a community where you can have those discussions and say, look, I worked on this, I tried it, I prepared the best I could with the knowledge I had and the resources I had, and I got to this point, and then it fell apart.
That's why when I get on stage or whatever, it's usually like, okay, let's talk about the failures first, and have a good laugh about all my mistakes, because let's be honest, this is what it is. That's how we learn. And I told him, I sat down with my board one day. Everybody was shocked when I opened up and talked about my board. They're like, a board? What? It's not equity. It's people that care and really want to see you develop. And I have 5 people on my board. And I told him about a time where I had one of my board members tell me, you need to shut down that company. And I'm like, you know how hard that is to hear? It's like a dagger in the heart. And I was like, okay. I said, let me sit back and let me listen to this. And he came at me, and not at me, but at the business, and said, okay, there's faltering here. There's issues here. And I said, okay, I agree. There are.
Welcome to the Property Management Success Podcast, where we interview leaders in the industry to uncover the secrets to profitability, efficiency, and achieving true freedom, whether it's your time, money, or lifestyle. I'm your host, Tony Klein, and I'm here to help you build a wildly successful property management business. Let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of the Property Management Success Podcast. I'm here with Tiffany Rosenbaum once again. Tiffany, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Tony. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I wanted to dig into some things with you. We've known each other for quite a while, and I know that you run many successful businesses. We've talked about those before. You run a property management business, you run a maintenance business, you have the gym, and I think there's something else if I'm missing something. But anyway, I wanted to talk about what you do on the day-to-day level for those, just kind of a surface level, because I know you've removed yourself from most of the day-to-day. And then I want to kind of talk about what you're doing now that you're not having to be so involved in the day-to-day. So if you could just give an overview of the different companies that you have and sort of how they're structured and what your role or input is in it.
Oh, that's interesting, because there's a lot of moving parts right now. So I have Rosenbaum Realty Group, which is a property management company in Arizona, and Stunning Stays, that is in Arizona and Utah. And then I also just opened up another company in Utah, which is Sundogs Property Solutions. I have Repair Masters. I have 8th Street Fitness Club, and a few other ones. But I love running businesses, and, when we get into entrepreneurship, usually we create a job for ourselves, and it's really hard to get out of that job and start working on the business like the E-Myth instead of in the business. And so right now, what I am into is I have completely taken myself out of the day-to-day, and I look at numbers, budgets, I speak, I go on podcasts, and I'm really on the marketing side and getting our name out there more and building the brand and helping people see the real and raw behind businesses. Because I think I was just talking at a conference, and I said a lot of times when we go to conferences, everybody's like, hey, everything's great. Things are good. We're doing fantastic. I manage this many properties. We're growing. But in essence, we're all entrepreneurs, and we're all struggling somewhere, and we're learning and growing. So my team, building my teams, because my infrastructure has been really big, and I'm actually in negotiations with 2 other companies right now trying to close those. And so I'm able to work on the deals and numbers and fact base instead of like in the day-to-day dealing with the owners or the residents or the maintenance company. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
So I'm curious about the fact that you have all of these different businesses, and a lot of people have a hard time just staying on top of one, right? So you've taken your interest and your skill set and you've spread it amongst many different companies. Do they share resources? Do you have the same people working at multiple companies, or do you have these people? I've developed this team specifically for this business. Like what's behind the scenes? Help us understand that.
100%. So Repair Masters has its own business, own people, everything is its own. Rosenbaum Realty Group is an infrastructure that has its own people, but the audit team and onboarding team that I have on Rosenbaum Realty Group does help out with other property management companies that I buy to make sure, and then we just bill it back to those companies. But they are the infrastructure to make sure everything goes really smooth and understanding all the different softwares we have and how it comes in so that I don't have to do it. Like I have them bring on the phone systems, I have them bring on the softwares, everything, so that I don't do that on a daily basis. So I don't know our softwares anymore except for the ones that I started at the very beginning. Because if you asked me to go into some of our softwares, I probably wouldn't know how to log in. I know that sounds weird, but that's why I love my team so much because, and we just talked about this yesterday, it's about building the championship team that sees the end goal and where we want to go together.
Yeah. So what made you decide, or what's inside of you that says I need to have all of these different outlets instead of pouring all that time, energy, resources into one company, one brand, like pour rocket fuel on one thing as opposed to breaking off into multiple different businesses? What's the reasoning behind that, and what do you think it's doing for you that putting all that effort into one business doesn't do for you?
One business, I'm wholeheartedly believe a business is a living, breathing organism that gives life to many. And the more businesses I have and the bigger we can get together is the more lives we can impact around us. And some people would disagree with me. Hey, you need to focus on one business. Now my board, we go back and forth because I have a board for all my companies. And so if there is an issue, they'll bring it to me and say, hey, Tiff, I think you're spreading yourself too thin here. And I'm like, okay, so what do I need to do? And they'll tell me, well, you need a person here, and then we'll talk it out. And so it's like, okay, so we need to get more of the right people. I don't have enough people, or where do I need to position them so we can continue to grow and develop and help everybody around us. So that's why I do it.
Yeah.
I want to impact more people, help more people. And the bigger we get together, the more we can impact.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something I want to circle back to. You talked about when you go to a conference or when you ask other entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's people are very surface level. Oh, everything's great. Yeah, business is booming or whatever, everything's smooth. And we know as entrepreneurs and people that spend a lot of time working with or coaching entrepreneurs it's just simply not true. You're in one of two categories. If everything is running super smooth, then you're probably dying. You're probably coasting, right? And so every one of us that's trying to do something new or better or stretch more or further, we're entering unknown territory. Now, somebody's been down that path before, but we haven't been down that path before. And there's a lot of value in being vulnerable and sharing. Look, I'm trying to do something new I've never done before, and I've shared this on my podcast in the past. I live in a constant state of imposter syndrome. If I don't feel like I'm experiencing some imposter syndrome, I start to worry about I must be coasting too much, because there is something about, in order to get better, we have to go through that level of, well, we don't quite know what we're doing yet. We're on the edge of our expertise or whatever. But I'm just curious to get your input and what you've seen as you've worked with people and as you've gone through your own path. Like, how do you manage that? Do you experience imposter syndrome, or is it just sort of, this is just the way it is now?
Probably a little bit of both. Like, think about it. You work out. I mean, Tony, you're amazing. I highly respect you. But where do we really gain? Where do we really learn? We learn when we struggle. Mm-hmm. And you said something that was very important. If we're just coasting, we're really dying. If you go to the gym, but you never lift a weight, and we don't do anything with the muscles, they atrophy. If we get up and we work them, it's not even the first rep, it's the last rep that really gets us and really builds our muscle and really gets us to the next level on our journey, on our muscle journey. Same thing in business. If we're just sitting here and everything feels comfortable and something doesn't feel like it's going to break, we're not learning and growing. and we're not pushing the limits. And that's why Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or any of these people, they're insanely intelligent, but their success level is to a whole nother level because of the fact that they will push the limits every second. They're not afraid to break. Like Jeff Bezos. I mean, Elon Musk, he was like, how many times can we blow up a rocket, Because how do we learn? George Clooney said it. I was watching him one day. He said it best. We don't learn through our successes. We learn through our failures. And I've had to learn that a lot. And one thing that's completely transformed our businesses, is the feedback I get. Like, I go to my team, and sometimes the feedback's not 100% what I want to hear. But that feedback, that transition, it makes me thrive. It makes me get better. And that's where I think I do thrive, and I think everybody has to get to, is where they look inward and go, how can I get better? How can I learn and grow? That's what I truly believe, that's why we're here on earth, to continue to learn and grow, to continue to become better. And I do not do well. I actually go through, I would say, I'll call it depression a little bit. Like, if I'm not learning, if I'm not growing and I'm stagnant, I get sad. I get like down. I'm like, that's why I do cold plunges. That's why I go, run every morning at 4:30. That's why I lift weights, because it's pushing me to another level, and it shows me, okay, now mental game in business, I got to do that every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. And I think, as you talked about, we learn through our struggles. There's two ways to learn, which is struggle and then sit in it. I call it doing an autopsy, opening it up, see what happened. I'm not looking to place blame. I'm just, let's see what happened. And the other thing that you can do is to invite other people into that autopsy and get their feedback, because it's one thing to kind of self-diagnose and analyze what's going on, but that's where being vulnerable and finding a group or a community where you can have those discussions and say, look, I worked on this. I tried it. I prepared the best I could with the knowledge I had and the resources I had. And I got to this point, and then it fell apart. And if you're not able to be vulnerable and talk about those things, I mentioned earlier, somebody has been down this path before. Now, not every single path has already been traveled, but most, there's somebody that's done what you're trying to do. And if you can have that vulnerability and open yourself up to the mistakes you're making, you can get people who have been down that path before to help accelerate your success and pull you along, as opposed to just trying option 2 and then option 3 and option 4 and guessing and not having anybody that's already done that. And so I really, just when you said that about that conference, it just really stuck with me, that I think there's not a lot of places anymore where we can go and open up like that, especially as leaders for our company.
That's why when I get on stage or whatever, it's usually like, okay, let's talk about the failures first, have a good laugh about all my mistakes, because let's be honest, this is what it is. That's how we learn. And I told him, I sat down with my board one day, and everybody was shocked when I opened up and talked about my board. They're like, a board? What? It's not equity. It's people that care and really want to see you develop. And I have 5 people on my board. And I told them about a time where I had one of my board members tell me, you need to shut down that company. And I'm like, you know how hard that is to hear? It's like a dagger in the heart. And I was like, okay. I said, let me sit back and let me listen to this. And he came at me, and not at me, but at the business, and said, okay, there's faltering here. There's issues here. And I said, okay, I agree. There are. And I said, okay, so how do we create a plan to put in place to get better? And if it doesn't get better, then we shut it down, because business is not emotion, it's facts. And so I said, oh, you're right. It's not making the return that it should for it to even thrive. It's not even, it's making money, but it's not making the return that I could make somewhere else. And that's what he was saying. And I said, okay. So we created a plan, and it got better. But sometimes the feedback's not always, it's not always great to hear. But if we will take it and really look inward, it's really great. And then we do level up meetings in our business. All of our management team gets together, and then we talk about problems. And what's phenomenal about this is, they're in the day-to-day. And entrepreneurs that struggle to get the feedback or to hear from their team, they're doing a disservice to their business, because the people into the day to day, they do want to win. They don't want to lose. And when they feel like they're losing every day, then it's killing the culture and it's killing the business. So I think feedback is the most important thing. Anybody, a janitor, food person, whatever, every single person should be giving feedback up, and management should be giving it down and creating a culture. And that's actually hard to create sometimes, because people are afraid to lose their job. So we work on this daily. And, it's been eye-opening to see, even after a culture has been built on this, even some people still are like, can I give that feedback? And so we have to reiterate this. There is no job losing off of feedback. Now, I think when you create the culture, you also have to go into feedback's great, and if there's a problem, come with a solution. It's not a time to just complain. It's a time to go, okay, problem, solution, how do we govern?
Yep.
So, yeah.
I want to dig in a little bit more on the board that you mentioned for your business. Tell me a little bit about what you look for when you're picking somebody to be on the board, and is it an official where you guys meet regularly on a set schedule? Because I think it's a great idea and a great concept, and I used to have something similar, maybe a little bit less formal, but I think a lot of businesses could benefit from that. So just kind of share what you can about that.
Yeah, I love my board. And I just emailed out, I just restructured it, because even your board, just like a coach, you have to level up. I truly believe that. They'll get you to one place, and then you got to find new. So I had been interviewing quite a few, and finally we finalized it. And so on my board, I have a tax strategist that knows the tax code better than anybody. I search all over the U.S. for it. And then I also have a lawyer where it's estate planning and governing to see what we're doing in our businesses and what needs to happen. And then I also have a real estate expert that has done way more than I've ever thought of doing. And then I also have businessmen that have grown their businesses to 10 times that I have, to make sure they can, that roadmap you said, they've already done it. How do we get there? And then I also have, I have someone that knows the marketing side. I just did this one. This one's new. I didn't have him on my board last time, but this guy is, everybody's seen him, and he runs his business. It's insane to watch, but he is a genius at marketing and his branding. And so I've brought him on. And they're all like, you talk about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions, but it's so neat to bring these people together. And it's not always comfortable, because I like open up the curtain and they see everything, financials, you name it, they see it, and how many employees. And they go through it a couple days before, and they get questions, and then they come and they poke at every single business and tell me where I'm screwing up. And so sometimes it's not great, but it's so great if that makes sense. Because then we go back and we go, okay, these are things that we need to get better at. This is where we need to grow. And so it's been amazing. And it's been a learning experience too, because sometimes you put people on your board and you're like, was that really a good fit? One of my board members, he got called on a mission, and I was so upset. I was so mad, because he was the biggest commercial broker in Arizona and other states. And I was sad to see him go. So I'm excited for him to come back. I'm like, can you come back on my board? But I love my board, and I think everybody should set one up, because in the industry you see coaches. Put the coach on your board. But I do feel, like, for instance, a coach is going to be good at one or two things. They're not going to know the tax code. They're not going to know estate planning. They're not going to know, if they're great at marketing and branding, usually they're not great somewhere else. Just like the DISC profile, just like entrepreneurs. We're not great at everything. So a board gets the roundness of getting everybody great and getting your business to move forward 100% instead of just marketing or just people. It's everything together.
Sure. So if somebody was going to, how would you advise somebody to say, okay, I'm going to start the board that can advise me through my next phase of growth, how would you advise them to start? Where do you start, and what, would you start with five? Would you start with two? Would you start with whatever you can get? Like
I love
what's
that question. That is like I had that exact same question after I spoke because they're like, board, what? And first, you have to look at your budget. Like, how much can you put towards this board? And the reason why I started the board, I'm going to back up just a little bit, is because I went to one of my mentors and I said, what was the first thing he said was the number one thing that gave him his success was his team. And I said, okay, but what teams do you have? And he said, my board is my number one team. And I was like, okay. So then I started setting it up. And at first, we didn't have five because you got to look at your budget and you go, okay, how much can I put towards it? Because if you're not going to give equity, you do have to pay these people to be there and really care. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. And then people miss meetings. So we pay ours. And so let's say you have 100 properties and you find someone that has 500 properties and then go, okay, bring in and look at your budget and go, how many people can I hire? How much money can I put towards it? And then, because one of my board members costs like a lot of money and we only meet 4 times. So it just depends on how much you can put towards it. The second thing is, so I would start with a coach. If all you have enough money to do 4 times a year and you can only get one person, because I think everybody's different because of the budget you can put towards it. So if you only have enough money, put a coach and then go, okay, we're going to meet 4 times a year or once a month. This is the money I have to put towards it. Then you do need a tax strategist. You do need a lawyer. You need all these different people. So as soon as you can start building, then start building. And then as you build up to 5 people. But start with 1, then go to 2, then go to 3, and then start building it out. But I would say getting to the 4 or 5, it exponentially rocket powers your company because you have all these people coming together. It's almost like a little mastermind, but they're like literally pointing at you. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what are you doing wrong? What can you get better at? Where can you improve? And so,
I love it. Okay, so we're going to work on getting that together for our company here. We're going to work on a board, so I'll give you an update.
I love it.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, as you've been able to scale these companies and you've been able to step out of the day-to-day, I know you've started transitioning into something new. And I love when somebody is really good at something and they start out at a beginner level again. And sometimes you don't stay at a beginner level that long because of your other experiences kind of feed into that and help accelerate it. But there is I'm really good at running long distance. I'm not so great at powerlifting. If I decided I'm going to go out there and try to be a bodybuilder, there are some things that will carry over and some things that won't. And I want to hear about where you are in this journey of, number one, what your journey is. Let's talk about that. And then I want to hear about where you are in it. And I want to hear about the struggles and some of the lessons that you've learned in the past that could help you with fueling that journey and having you accelerate where you would have been if you had not had these other experiences.
Okay. So about a year ago, I'm going to go back because you're going to hear about someone in my team. Because the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is because of this person. It was a friend from college, actually, and I always had I had a deal. I will never hire a friend. But I was looking for a marketing director, and I was like, she knows marketing. Hey, what would I hire for? And she was like, can I put my name in the hat? And I was like, I don't know if that's such a good idea. I like you a lot, but if I have to fire you, we're going to ruin a relationship. She goes, no. If you don't like me, you fire me, we can still be friends. And in the background, I knew that probably wouldn't happen. But how she presented herself, I was like, okay, let's go to lunch. And so I ended up hiring her. And she goes, Tiff, we need to go to lunch. And I was like, okay. So we went to lunch. And she goes, Tiff, you need to speak more. And I'm like, and she knew I've always wanted to, but I've always been scared, to be honest. I've always been like, what if, when you pour out your soul and you really pour out your stories, that's a whole nother ballgame. And stories is how you really present yourself. And then she goes, I think we need to start doing events. And I'm like, all of a sudden my anxiety started, because when you've never done something before, there's a little bit of anxiety. All of a sudden, I have to put my face out there. I have to put my story out there. A business, I can hide behind the business. I don't have to do, I can build a team. They can be the face. It's all great. But so we left that meeting, and it was more than a year ago because I've been speaking more than that. But I said, okay. And so we got our first speaking thing, and what was great is I'm a practicer. So most people, they're like, oh, I get up on stage and I just wing it. I can't do that. I remember the first speaking assignment. She sat down with me every day for hours practicing, and I'm like, give me feedback. Tell me where I'm not doing good. And the anxiety would come up, and I'm like over here going like this. She goes, Tiff, calm down. So she was like my second coach, even though she was a team member and I paid her to be an employee. But she is the one that was like pushing me. Like, hey, Tiff, you got to get out of your comfort zone. I love to get out of my comfort zone, but this was a new level. And not knowing how people will receive you personally was a struggle for me. But after I got up on that first stage, I loved it. But not because of me. It was because I wanted to share with people real and raw. I wanted to share with people entrepreneurship is not. It's not all this high and mighty and everything goes great. Because that's what you usually hear a lot of times. I'm like, no, this was my worst hire. This is what it is. And then we did our first event. And up to the event, I was anxious. I was like, I've never done this before. Is anybody going to show up? And we were like thinking 25 to 50. I'm like, you know what? So be it. We had like 100. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, but having that second person that pushes you, that sees in you and that helps you plan, prep, I think that always helps. It's like having a coach or having somebody, the board. But going back to that, it's that struggle and that unknown. And it's hard sometimes because I had never done it before. Business, I've done. I can do that. But going up on stage and being on a lot of panels and being on podcasts and, being asked to come to companies and speak to the companies, it's like, that's a new level of putting myself out there and being able to be ridiculed. But it's learning how to put one foot in front of the other and realizing nothing's going to go perfect, but just continue to go and learn from it. And if we take everything as a learning opportunity, then the only way we can go is up.
So how do you think that experience over the last couple of years of you doing this, how do you think that experience has changed you as a person and changed what you believe you're capable of across the board with all of your businesses?
I'm really big into mindset. So I think the only person that sets us back is ourselves. I really believe that we can do anything we put our mind to. What we think is what we believe, and what we believe is what we become. And this experience has only shown me that more. Like before, I've never been on stage. And after, I'm like, you know what? I can do it. I've never been on a podcast before. And then I was like, oh, I can do it. I love to talk to people. And then I started my podcast. And I'm like, what if people don't want to go on it? And then I'm like, I'm getting Keaton Hoskins. And I'm having people from across the nation reach out to me. And I'm like, what? And it's been interesting because I honestly actually think it's the biggest education for ourselves. Like, I'm helping these people market and get out there more, but at the same time, I'm learning, and I've always believed this, but no business is the exact same because you have people involved. There's processes, there's things that you can do there's marketing, sales, things like that. But everybody, like in property management, you know this, everybody runs their business different. Like, they all have their own ways of doing it. And so just through this process, I've learned that no matter what we decide, we can do. And there's only one way to go up if we take it as a learning experience.
Okay, I want to close out with a couple of things. I want to talk about, you mentioned you brought on somebody to help you with marketing. Mm-hmm. And as you know, the name of the podcast is the Property Management Success Podcast, right? So we want to talk about how can we help our audience be more successful with the things that we talk about on the show. And a lot of people are not fortunate enough to have a big enough portfolio to be able to bring in people to do specific roles, like having somebody that can come in and help with marketing or branding or something like that. So are there nuggets you could share with us as we kind of close out, things that you've learned through having that resource or access to that resource that you think that companies that maybe either are smaller or operating on a thinner margin that they could implement to help them with marketing? What should they be doing? What should they be looking for?
100%. Because at first I didn't have the money to put it into a marketing director. I mean, now I've shelled a lot of money out, but they're worth it. And so I love them. But let's say you have 100 properties. How hard is it? And it does take more time of the individual, the entrepreneur, the owner. But they should be posting on social media. Take a video. Do not worry if it's perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you go look through my videos, you would probably laugh half the time because they're not perfect. Now that I have production, yeah, but if you go back to the beginning, you'll be like, you should have never posted that, Tiff. But it's about consistency. You go to a property, and property management, we're talking about property management. Go through a walkthrough and just video it and go, what happens during a walkthrough? And post that. People just want to know that you're consistent and that you're coming back. The problem is in marketing, you have so many people start, stop. It's just like a podcast. You have to be consistent. Just always come back and show your viewers or people that are watching that, guess what? You're coming back. And as for the entrepreneur, you can post every morning when you wake up. Just post after your workout or find out the best time to post. But post the same video on all social media platforms. But make sure you know who you're talking to first. I would say that's a big thing. But consistency. And you can do it. I think it's nerve-wracking. I think people don't do it though, Tony, because I think they're scared or afraid people will think that it's not perfect or I don't have makeup on or get that ahead. People really don't care. They really don't. They want to know that you're there and they want to know that you're real and raw. And so anything you post, as long as it has to do with what you're trying to do, just continue to be consistent and don't think you have to put a big budget behind it.
So what's the benefit of posting on social media? What are we trying to accomplish by doing that for our business?
Okay, so that's a really good question, like a phenomenal question, because you need to know your outcome. Because for me, I do social media and the speaking because of the opportunities it's giving me. I'm not trying to sell people on social media. That's not really my end game. My social media is all about giving value. That's all it is. And so because of it, I've had opportunities to open up companies in Utah. I've had opportunities to buy companies because they reach out and they're like, hey, I see that you love business. Would you be interested? I'm like, yeah, let's talk. So my reasoning is completely different. But if you're trying to sell people on social media, then you need to know that and you need to go hone in on that and make sure that's the route you go.
I heard something yesterday and it kind of hit me in the gut a little bit because I believe it and yet I don't want to accept it. So it's
all of us.
Yeah, it's the best known beats the best every time. And it's about being out there. People can't hire you or your company if they don't know about you. And if I repeatedly am in front of you and talking to you, even if I'm not as good or there's a company that is not as good as me, but they're being more vocal or more out there in the marketplace, there's just this perception that, well, they're out there doing that much. They must really be good. And so the part that I don't like about that is we work really hard with our clients to make sure not only that we deliver to our clients, but that our clients deliver to their clients. And we take a lot of pride in providing framework where people can put a really good business together. But then the second component of that is, well, the best known is going to beat the best. So we have to work on that too. We have to not only be the best, but we have to then also put ourselves out there and be the best known. And there's a lot of different ways to go about doing that. But I definitely think you hit on something when you talk about the social media aspect, because like it or not, our society is addicted to being on social media. So if we're going to go where they're at, that's where they're at.
I love that you said that because Grant Cardone, he was, when he started in social media, and he was talking about like just posting crazy videos. He's like, you know what? I can outpost anybody. I mean, you talk about these people that are really big on social media. Guess what? It's because they post so much. And they're, like you said, they're in front of everybody so much. Guess what? Everybody knows who they are, right? So at the end of the day, if they're going to go to someone, they're going to go to someone that's known. Like, for instance, I have a lawyer. He's on my board. Love him. Amazing. When we got to a certain level, he said, you know what? I'm going to refer you out. And I'm like, don't refer me out. I really like you. He's like, you're getting above my pay grade. And I said, no, please no. And so he referred me out. We went to the other one. And no matter how great this other lawyer was, no matter how, experienced he was, when he talked to me, I'm like, no. I'm like, I don't know you, and I've never seen you, but also I don't have a relationship with you. So social media and the advertising, you're starting to create that relationship before it ever happens, And so if you want to get out there and you want to build something, marketing, I hate to say it, it is like what everybody has to do. If you're not marketing, if you're not putting money into it, you're not growing.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
It's hard, don't get me wrong, and it's something that's very nerve-wracking sometimes. And we talked about the whole podcast almost. You're gonna fail. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna have some posts that have 0 views. And it's just part of the game of learning and growing. It's like that going to the gym again. That last rep, you got to keep going, Don't stop before you actually gain the access to what you want.
Yeah. I used to coach Little League basketball, and this is a tangent, but it ties back in. Yeah. So for like 36 seasons, we did 3 seasons year round. So for like 13 years, I coached Little League basketball, and we got really quite good. Story for another time. I'm going to stay focused. But
I wanted to hear it.
But one of the things that we did, one of the reasons I think that we got so good at this was before practice started. I always showed up early, and I always told the kids, you get here, and before practice starts, you get your 20. Now, I would take a team from first and second grade, co-ed, all the way up until I got them to high school when they went off to their high school teams, and I started over with another team. And first time I did boys, second time I did girls, 2 totally different experiences. But the reason I think we were successful is before every practice, we would tell them, get your 20. So when you're in second or third grade and you're supposed to get your 20, and what that meant was make 20 baskets before practice starts. I don't care if you have to take 100 shots or 200 shots, make 20 baskets so that we've got some success, something to build off of. And that way, when we're taking shots in practice where other people are around and we're running plays and the pressure and the focus is on you, it's no big deal because of that repetition. And I think it's the same thing with your speaking, with the podcast, with the marketing, social media. It's all about just getting comfortable doing the reps.
Oh my goodness, what you said is like, it's so needed, Tony, because Russell Brunson says it. He's like, the first 45, just call them crap. It just is what it is. So when I started my podcast, I was like, I need a year worth of content so I can decide which ones are. The first 45, I think I had 100 that were horrible, and that's what we always talk about. My marketing director and I, we laugh about it, but I'm like, we need to redo that one. That was really bad. But it's all about, it's okay. The first 45, the first 100, whatever it needs to be, allow it to be bad so you get better.
Yeah.
You can't start and be perfect. You got to start at the bottom, no matter what you do.
I think we must have grown up with the same influences or something, because I talk a lot about that too. The first 100 times you do anything is just practice. So get through the first 100 as fast as you can. And after that, you can start working on developing your skill. But the first 100, you're working on developing the habit.
100%. I love that, Tony.
Well, Tiff, it's been a lot of fun being on here with you again. I'm going to give you the last word to close out. Anything you want to talk about, anything you want to promote, how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in following up with you more about what you've got going on?
Thank you for having me on. The best way to get a hold of me is my social media, Instagram, or all of them. It's Tiffany M. Rosenbaum. And we are doing a lot of things, giving back, and everything from my social media is completely free. We do a monthly webinar on market of real estate. We do events every quarter, and everything is free to the guests. So anything on my social media is free to give back.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks so much, Tony.
Thanks for tuning in to the Property Management Success Podcast. We'll be back with another value-packed episode to help you level up your property management game. If you've got something valuable out of today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss out on future insights and strategies and tactics. Until next time, here's to your success.